In the history of the Ma'afa, the British are the Nazis. But whereas the Germans have apologised and reparated for their sins, you have not done so. And as such, you shame not only yourself, but also your nation. Now, it was the 27th of March 2007, just after noon, when I uttered those words to the late British monarch who had sanctioned and was participating in a great deception. You see, gathered at Westminster Abbey, the spiritual home of the United Kingdom, the heads of the British monarchy, government and church had come together to conduct a religious ritual to celebrate Britain's role in African enslavement. Now, I was there as an invited witness. I was cold inside at the audacity of the scale of their plans to rebrand themselves and respective institutions from their role as chief architects of the most horrific, longest-lasting crime against human beings, now to the heroes that allegedly liberated African people from the sins of enslaving themselves. It was madness, and the optics are straight out of Hollywood. Now, inside, my body felt a chill, and this was as they sought to mask the transition of their crime from transatlantic enslavement to colonial and later neo-colonial enslavement as if they had never happened. And as I looked around for someone, something, anything, to warm my spirits, my heart wept at the images of pomp and meek docility being transmitted across the world via the BBC. There were kneeling Africans, thanking Massa and begging God for forgiveness through prayer. There were singing Africans, celebrating liberation from their physical shackles despite the construction of our new mental chains. There were complicit Africans, secure in political capital by flaunting their proximity to wealth and power, despite being victims of this hypocrisy. Sadly for them, nothing could mask their moral cowardice. As the nation danced to the tune of 20 million plus, this Wilberforce jamboree, it made me feel colder. I felt alone. I wished to be home. You see, what was missing were the voices of millions of African people watching the proceedings as they were transmitted live across the world. I needed to feel and reconnect with those skinfolk who were also kinfolk spiritually and physically voicing a collective, hell no. And then this realization, it hit me. I heard their cry and remembered the words quoted by the author and activist Alice Walker, and she said that we are the ones we have been waiting for. And inside my head, a voice spoke to me and said, leave, get up, and get out. There was no decision to make. It was either obey corrupt authority or honor those who had fought for all our freedoms. And so I moved to escape the belly of the beast and was forced to resist in the process. Not in our name, I explained, as I warned anyone seeking to place us back in political, spiritual, and physical chains that I would knock them out. I resisted, and the violence persisted. I resisted until the ritual finally stopped, at least for a moment, as our collective voices insisted that they would. Now, I was honored to be the vessel the ancestors chose that day to do their spiritual bidding. As that child not embraced by the village, I knew, given the same circumstances, I would do the same thing again and again and again and again. Yet in that instant, I was born again in the eyes of the state and instantly became the nation's madman, the wrong, dishonourable Tonyag Betu, a so-called NOBE, for those of you who don't know what that means, a non-obedient boy of empire. I was then arrested by the police, attacked by the state. I faced death threats, assaults on my family, the decimation of my Pan-Africanist organisation, losing most of my closest friends in the process. It was a frightening time for many. But we survived. Just barely, body scarred, but spirit intact. So I suppose the next question is, am I mad? Well, perhaps. For Thomas Sankara once said, you cannot carry out fundamental change without a certain amount of madness. In this case, it comes from nonconformity, the courage to turn your back on the old formulas, the courage to invent the future. It took the madmen of yesterday for us to be able to act with extreme clarity today. I really love that quote. But am I a monster? Because that's something Kelsley tried to make out I was. Well, I'm going to leave that for you to decide. And yet consider the words of the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who once explained, and I believe possibly from experience, it is those engaged in creating and fighting moral monsters that reveal much about the demon that rests within themselves. It's a poignant quote, and it reminds me of what took place in February 2021 when I became Commissioner for Diversity in the Public Realm. What I saw were the same malignant forces that were working hard to hound the Hackney MP Diane Abbott out of political life. Well, I saw them turn their ire on me. They labelled me a so-called anti-black racist. I am not. They labelled me an anti-vaxxer. I'm not. And when that all failed, they weaponized my call for African people to secure justice for colonial crimes as an ode to anti-Semitism. It was not. But it's a lesson to learn. I think Malcolm Omowale X, also known as the Honourable El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, once said, "The media would have us believing our friends are our enemies and our enemies our friends." And sadly, he was right. But what does that mean? Well, I think it means that we must resist, even from within the belly. For if we do not, then even those that look like us can and will betray us. She willfully and skillfully excludes the history of African enslavement and indeed the research of numerous scholars with expertise in this area, many in this room today. Those who seek to rewrite history would also pretend that colonial enslavement should be erased from the narrative with the contemptuous claim that Africa and her children benefited from British imperialism. The revisionists ignore the many anti-colonial struggles that we only just recently recalled on African Liberation Day on the 25th of May. And yet one look in the vaults of the heritage and archival institutions around the land, from the British Museum and the Victoria and Albert Museum to the National Archives and the bonfire of its Operation Legacy, the facts will reveal who gained from this unique, unjust enrichment, facilitated by the raiding, parading, and murder, raping, and exploitation of not just people, but also their dreams, their sciences, even their body parts alongside their cultural artifacts, which are still traded and displayed as antiquities from across the world, secured through theft, pillaging, punitive raids, confiscations, trophy taking, and coercive trades. In a reparation report from the recently formed Brattle team based in the Caribbean, they calculate the UK as owing the various nations which are home to the descendants of those enslaved a minimum of $26 trillion. And this is calculated by estimating the value of stolen labour. Now, while there is a long overdue community discussion about the difference between compensation and reparation, we can learn much from Indigenous scholars like Kim Talbot and Audrey Simpson, who argue about forms of refusal and reparative taking back, which are far better representing calls for ancestral justice instead of some altruistic, politically motivated giving or loaning back of looted articles. You see, a couple of days ago, we saw the former US president become a convicted felon. Now, I actually hope he wins the US election and reveals to the world what those of us living with the West's hypocrisy and inaction on the war crimes committed against innocent civilians in Palestine, Sudan, and the Congo have long been aware of. And that is that the same malignant energy that enables these atrocities is a continuation of those empty enlightenment-posing vessels that created a world rife with Afrophobia, born from slavery and colonialism. I include British politicians like Sunak, Starmer, Johnson, and Blair, with American ones like Biden, Bush, Trump, and even Obama, when I state that their commitment to democracy and the rule of law, and even the social contract, only applies if it doesn't threaten the desire to cling to power. To correct the former manager of the Sierra Leone company in 1808, look it up and see who it is. It is they, not we, who are all guilty. I draw upon the evidence of a plethora of scandals ranging from Windrush to Grenfell, the tainted blood scandal, the deaths in custody, to state that their claimed belief in the value of universal human rights only applies if the victims are racialized as white. So back onto my question. how do we resist when we are living within the belly of the beast? Well, like my ancestors whose blood, sweat, strength, courage, and ultimate survival resulted in us being here today, this is after centuries of enslavement, oppression, and exploitation. We must seek hope through love and unity as they did, and understand a revolutionary inferno raged in spaces such as Haiti in 1791, a little over 220 years ago, barely 2 generations, was not a one-off in our history, but the lighting of a fuse of a chain reaction still yet to be fully realized. What shaped resistance when living in the belly of the beast? Well, any form that helps us to keep each other warm with dreams of freedom, acts of resistance, and the understanding that the future is forever one of endless possibilities is the correct answer. Today I attend this gathering with those of you present in person and in spirit to help challenge and undo the British state's misdeeds of 2007 and prevent the same mistake occurring in 2038. I hope we and our allies for justice and peace continue engaging in acts of resistance to build upon the efforts of all our ancestors fighting against evil rooted in every form of discrimination, from racism to ableism. Now, some of you will know that I'm a Pan-Africanist. Others will know me as an artist or a sci-fi loving nerd, and more recently a decolonizing scholar activist based in a colonial university. So with that in mind, I want to close with a quote from the late Haitian academic and fellow anthropologist, Michel Rolfe-Trouliat. And he writes, "We want to keep in mind that deeds and words are not as distinguishable as we often presume. History does not belong only to its narrators, professional or amateur. And while some of us debate what history is or was, others take it into our own hands." It's a powerful quote. We have a choice to make, my friends, for resistance is never futile. Thank you, and may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.